It's Morbin time.
It's morbin time.
I have finally watched Morbius, 2.5 years after its original release. Why did it take me so long to watch this movie? Well, it's because everyone and their mama seems to hate it, and so I just didn't feel any urgency to watch it. Why am I watching it now? Well, I believe in watching things and forming your own opinions on them. I know everyone seems to hate this movie, everyone who's seen it seems to hate it, everyone who hasn't seen it still hates it. No one that I know who's watched it has liked it. Nothing. I haven't heard anything positive whatsoever about this movie. And that kind of put me on this path where I didn't feel like I wanted to watch it immediately, but I did want to watch it one day just to see for myself, is it as bad as people say? I will say that I do like to go into movies and TV shows for the first time with no real expectations. I like to go in with a level of objectivity so that I can properly judge if something's good or bad, at least by my own opinion. And I just don't like to have that outside influence as much. And this is one that definitely has a lot of outside influence. A lot of people are very vocal about not liking this movie. And everything positive that gets said about it is just kind of a joke. It's not real, it's not serious. So this one was a little bit difficult to go into objectively, but I think I managed to do it pretty well. Let's just start with the story of this movie, because I think that the story is actually pretty decent. It's not terrible. I think there's a lot more we could have done with some of the side characters and even some of the main characters. There's some character development that I would have liked to see that we just never got. I think at times the story feels like it's missing a little something, like we're bouncing around a little bit and there's just something there in the middle that isn't. So I think that the story is decent, but it's not the worst I've ever seen, for sure. I think that it's basic, I think it's generic, sure, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad. So while I was watching the movie, I did jot down some notes of specific scenes that I wanted to bring up. So let's talk about some of the specific things that happen in the movie. Spoilers for Morbius, I guess, if anyone actually cares. Let's talk about the design for the hallway lights in the scene that the nurse gets murdered. I know that that's not something that was created specifically for the movie Morbius. It's something that's been in other movies. It's something that exists in real life. But what is this design? I hate it. How is this efficient in any way? Like, sure, maybe it saves power to have most of the lights off at all times. But guess what? Why would I want to walk in a hallway that's pitch black with only a 2-meter radius of light around me or whoever it is that's walking through the hallway? Not only does that seem like poor design because whoever's there can't really see like 2 feet in front of their face and are gonna walk right into something, but also that's how you get murdered. Those are murder hallway lights. There's no way that I'm walking through that hallway with those lights and thinking, oh, I'm gonna make it out of here alive. Okay, here's one of my biggest complaints about this movie. I don't think that Milo is the worst villain I've ever seen in a superhero movie, but I do think he's missing some critical character development. To me, it just doesn't feel like there's enough motivation there, or not shown enough motivation for him to just make that switch to being the villain. It just feels like he gets a taste of power and is immediately corrupted. Maybe he was a bad person all along just because of the pain from being bullied as a kid and maybe even through his adult life. Maybe there's that. If we're meant to believe that, we should have been shown that more. Or maybe he is a good person who makes a 180 to villainy because he feels rejected by Michael when Michael refuses to give him the cure for his ailment. Look, whatever it is, whether it's that, whether it's him being a bad person all along, whether it's a whole nother thing, we aren't shown enough for it to be clear what his motivation is. It just feels like there's something missing, that there's something not all there to explain why he would just turn on his best friend, why he would lash out and kill a character like Nicholas, who is like a father figure to him. There's just something that we aren't shown, something that's missing from the plot. And speaking of Nicholas, I think there was so much more they could have done with that character. In the end, it just feels like his character didn't have very much impact on the plot. He wasn't of a lot of importance and he just kind of died unceremoniously. And then like right after, you have Martine die, and I just feel like that wasn't really needed for the movie. Nicholas's death should have been enough to just put that fire in Morbius to go and stop Milo and to, bring justice or whatever. you know? And with Martine dying shortly after, it just felt a bit redundant. If they had just left Martine alone, they could have had Nicholas's death be that thing for Morbius that makes him go out and do what he needs to do. And not only would that have been better because it wouldn't be redundant, but also it would have gave the character of Nicholas more importance, and it wouldn't have just felt like his character was just inserted in the movie. He would have had more significance, and that's something that I think is totally lacking from his character. So it just feels like a missed opportunity there. And I know Martine didn't really die. She got a little bit of vampire blood in her mouth, and then she lived in the end. When that was happening, I was thinking to myself, oh, maybe she turns into a vampire and lives. And then I thought, oh, maybe not. And yeah, they did it. They turned her into a vampire and let her live. But regardless, they didn't need to go through that, oh, maybe she's dead, maybe she's not, because we could have used Nicholas's death for that. We didn't need that. But, I mean, it is what it is, it happened, whatever. The Vulture coming over from the MCU to the Sony Spider-Verse is one of my least favorite things about this movie, if not my #1 least favorite thing. And here's why. They tried to piggyback off of the whole No Way Home thing, where everyone who knows Peter Parker as Spider-Man is coming over to our universe. Well, there's no reason that someone who's from our universe, who's from the main MCU universe, who knows Peter Parker as Spider-Man, there's no reason for anyone like that to go over to the Sony Spider-Verse. That makes no canonical sense whatsoever. And it bothers me that Sony couldn't think of a single better explanation for why they wanted him in this movie. As the audience, you know it's just Sony being stubborn. You know it's just Sony wanted Michael Keaton over as the Vulture in our universe, so we're gonna make it happen because we have the rights. You couldn't, do anything clever. You couldn't, write something to make it make sense. That bothers me a lot. It's a cash grab and I don't like it. And not only was it meant to be a cash grab for later down the line and to get people excited for what's coming later down the line, it clearly didn't work. So there you have it. It's not good, but then it also didn't even work the way you thought it would. So, I mean, everybody loses. It defies all logic why Sony would want to build up a Sinister Six without a Spider-Man in that universe. But aside from that, you have all the rights to so many of Spider-Man's rogues. You could have had Michael Keaton reprise his role as the Vulture in your universe without it being the one from the MCU. You could have introduced him as a variant. You could have introduced so many other characters as variants, and you decided not to. I don't know the whole rights with Michael Keaton specifically being the Vulture and the deal with Marvel, but I'm pretty sure you could have had him as a variant in your universe. If not, recast him. It doesn't have to be Michael Keaton. You could have had the Vulture. People would be more excited if you weren't just trying to piggyback poorly off of the MCU. Do your own thing. But yeah, those two end credit scenes irked me more than the rest of the movie did. Honestly, I don't think that Morbius, the movie as a whole, is terrible. And I know that's gonna be kind of sacrilegious to say. A lot of people aren't gonna like that I said that. But it is what it is. I don't think the movie is actually terrible. It's not all that bad. I think it definitely has its flaws. I think it's definitely far from a perfect film. But anyone who says that it's the worst movie they've ever seen, count yourself lucky that that's the worst movie you've ever seen. I think that character development could have been better in this movie. We could have fleshed out the side characters more and the main villain more, but I think that Morbius and Martine were done well enough to get by. I think that the movie Morbius actually has its merits if you're objective enough to acknowledge them. For me personally, I kind of like the visuals in this movie. I think the VFX are pretty good. And I know they're not incredible. I know they're not groundbreaking, but I like them. You might think that from time to time the visuals look a little bit video gamey. I wouldn't disagree with you, but at the same time, so what? How is it any different than most of the superhero content we got in that couple year period? A lot of stuff looked a little subpar at the time, and so I think that by measuring that to what came out around that time, I think it's pretty good. And even if you're not looking at the other VFX from the same year or the year prior to when this came out, I still think that the VFX for this movie look not half bad. To bring the topic of the plot back up, I think that the plot wasn't bad. It just feels choppy from time to time, and it feels like we're missing something from time to time. But overall, I can't say that the plot is bad. I think that the acting in this movie was done well. And I know it's not super deep at all times, sometimes it feels a little off, but I like it. I know a lot of people don't like the acting in this movie, just like they don't like a lot of things about this movie. But here's what I'll say. I know that this is a very talented cast, and in my opinion, any acting imperfections, any acting moments that feel off, I will chalk up to the script. I will throw at the feet of people behind the scenes, behind the camera, because this movie is flawed. But I think that the actors did the best they could with what they had in terms of the script. Jared Leto was surprisingly good in this movie. And I think the reason why I would use the term surprisingly good is because I'm not the biggest Jared Leto fan, and I just wasn't expecting all that much from him. And to be fair, his acting wasn't incredible in this movie or anything, but I think he did a good job with what he had to work with. And I think that this is a much better role for him than when he was Joker in Suicide Squad. I think that this is definitely a tier above in terms of him fitting the character and it just working. I thought that Matt Smith had a good performance in this movie. Any complaint I have about the character of Milo is just that. It's a complaint about the character of Milo, not a complaint about Matt Smith. And I shouldn't be surprised because he's a beloved actor, but I think this might actually be the first role I've seen him in, which is kind of crazy. I thought that Adria Arjona did a good job in this movie, and hers is a name that I don't really recognize, but come to find out after the fact, she's Bix from Andor. I can see it now, I just didn't know her name. I think that Tyrese Gibson is a good actor, but unlike his co-stars Jared Leto, Matt Smith, Adria Arjona, I think that they were able to do more in this script because of the writing. Their characters were given more to do, and they just had more room to maneuver around a little bit, if you know what I'm saying. Tyrese Gibson's character, whose name I don't even know, but his character just wasn't given enough to do. And so I think Tyrese Gibson just wasn't given the chance to put on a great performance. I think that what he does in this movie, his scenes and his parts, I think that what he does is good from an acting standpoint, but he just wasn't given what he needed to put on a great performance because of the writing, because of the way his character was written. He just wasn't able to, put on something great. And again, that's nothing against him. I'm putting that solely at the feet of the people behind the camera. I feel the exact same way about Jared Harris. I love Jared Harris as an actor, but I think that the script and the writing just doesn't allow him to do all that much. He's just kind of there. Don't even get me started on Michael Keaton. I love Michael Keaton, but he was just shoehorned into this movie to get people excited about the future of Sony Spider-Verse, and it didn't work. I honestly feel bad for him, because how many superhero movies has he been in recently that have just been whatever? This one, The Flash, the Batgirl movie that is never gonna see the light of day. He's just kind of been in superhero movies without being in any great superhero movies. And it really just sucks because superhero movies wouldn't be what they are today without Michael Keaton. He helped jumpstart the Batman movies, and a lot of movies happened because of that first Batman movie. And so it just, it's unfortunate. I kind of feel bad for all the actors though, because I know that going into this, they probably thought it would be good for their careers, and then as we all know, it wasn't. I noticed that a lot of scenes and a lot of pieces of dialogue that I remember being in the trailer didn't make the final cut of this movie. And those that were in there were vastly different to how they appeared in the trailer. For example, the scene when Morbius scares the guy by saying, "I am Venom," that was a lot different in the trailer. I'm glad they made that change though, because I think it was a lot less cringy in the movie than it was in the trailer, at least for me personally. But from what I remember, a lot of scenes that were cut entirely featured Tyrese Gibson and Jared Harris. So it's kind of unfortunate because I think that we could have had more depth for those characters. They could have been more fleshed out, they could have been more well-rounded, and they just decided to cut that and leave everything else. I don't know why they made that decision, but I just don't know why. I don't. It's my opinion that they should have just left those scenes in. I don't know why they cut them in the first place, but you should have left those scenes in to make those characters feel more essential to the plot, because without it, they just feel very shallow. I kind of just have to remind myself though that this is another movie that was heavily delayed by COVID, and I don't know how that impacted what was cut and what wasn't. Overall, I do not think that Morbius is a great movie, but I also don't think it's a truly terrible movie. Not in the way that people say it is. It has many flaws, but not enough to make me hate the movie. As crazy as it is to say, and as much as I personally wasn't expecting it, I enjoyed my first watch through of this movie. I don't know if it's going into these movies with no expectations that makes me enjoy them more, or if it's just my experience, being someone who's worked on movies, that gives me an extra appreciation for some things. I don't know what it is, but, you know, I had a decent time. And I know people are gonna be kind of appalled by that. They're gonna say it's sacrilegious for me to not hate this movie, but that's life. Contrary to a lot of people's take on this movie, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. And quite frankly, it's not even really that close. I know it's fun to hate on this movie, and it's funny to hate on this movie. There have been some funny memes, like it's morbin time and more $1 billion and whatnot, but this isn't the worst movie that's ever been made. And if you think that it is, I encourage you to watch more movies, because you will find worse. They're out there, and they're waiting for you to find them. Cue the more billion hate comments I'm gonna get. But if you want to help me out here on YouTube, liking this video, commenting on this video, subscribing to the channel, checking out some of my other videos, all those things help me grow the YouTube channel. Hey, if you hate this video, subscribe. You can hate on the next one. Hey, I'm trying to get to more billion subscribers. So until next time, it's morbin time.